Hello everyone, welcome back. I'm Chanchal Agarwal from Eastern Financiers, and today I'm going to discuss very interesting investment idea for your offshore portfolio book. Uranium. Why am I talking uranium today? Give me a couple of minutes because I'm going to exactly tell you why it makes sense to invest in uranium for the next couple of years. But before we do that, let's understand the global energy supply. So before pandemic, everything was in order. Yes, there was a supply crunch, but things were not as bad. And then of course, pandemic happened, lockdowns happened, there were supply crunches, supply side issues. Coming to 2022, it looked like everything now will get back to order. But no, then we saw a war. Russia attacked Ukraine. Now look at this. Russia is one of the largest exporter of natural gas to Europe. Europe and US has sanctioned Russia because of the entire war, and Russia cannot use its US reserves to transact. What was the overall impact for this? Russia said, okay, all done. I am not supplying natural gas to you, come what may. They halted the gas supply. What was the impact for this? Germany, which was dependent on Russia for its natural gas requirements, has no clue how it will survive the winters. Countries which were migrating to renewable energy sources like solar, wind, hydro had to actually take a step back and come back to using coal. Now, that's a challenge on the entire green revolution that was crafted and framed by these countries. Again, let's come back to uranium. All said and done, but why uranium? Nuclear energy. We believe nuclear energy is the most safest, reliable, low-cost factor of production in this entire chain where, of course, oil is reaching to most volatile levels. Coal, there is a production issue, and natural gas, of course, we know there is a supply issue coming in. Why looking at nuclear energy in this whole scenario makes sense? Nuclear is the most cleanest source of energy in terms of CO2 emissions. In fact, there is hardly any emissions. If you compare it to other resources like coal, oil, etc., the emissions are much higher. So what happened to nuclear over all these decades? Nuclear had a negative halo effect after 1970s incident in US, after the Chernobyl incident in 1980s, and the massive blow was of course the Fukushima incident in 2011. Many reactors were shut. Countries had developed this whole negative effect around nuclear energy. Reactors were planned for shutdown in a phased manner over all these years. But do you know there are actually lower number of deaths per terawatt of power generated in nuclear versus other sources of energy? In fact, at once, nuclear generates power for 350 days a year. Compare that to coal, that's about 150 to 175 days a year. What is it for things like solar, wind, etc.? That's 100 days per year. So that's how efficient nuclear is in terms of whole power generation. They spent millions and millions of money to get the nuclear reactors online. And around 2012, after the whole Fukushima incident happened, they planned a successful phased out shutdown of these nuclear plants. So in essence, millions and millions of money were technically wasted. Now that's about the past. What is presently happening? There is a lot of noise in the mainstream media about nuclear. A lot of people have been writing why nuclear should be the next power that we should rely on. Countries like India are looking at increasing their nuclear dependency or nuclear power dependency as we call from as low as 3% now to as high as 25%. Europe is now understanding and accepting nuclear as its next power source. To give you an example out here, they have now signed the Sustainable Power Taxonomy in 2002, which makes nuclear one of the key components in the entire energy basket. In fact, presently there are 50 odd reactors that are under construction. Millions and millions of dollars again have been invested into getting nuclear capacity back on track. But these are the good points about nuclear, about uranium. Uranium being one of the most important fuel that you need in nuclear. Of course, nuclear is good, people are spending money, nuclear will be back on track. But what about uranium? Do we have the raw material that's needed for nuclear energy? Who is the largest producer of uranium? Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan produces almost 40% of the global uranium demand. Now that's great. What about the uranium surplus? Do you know, over the past few years, capex into uranium mining has been declining consistently. In fact, the number of miners/developers are down from 500 to almost 40 now. In fact, one of the CEOs of this biggest uranium company in Kazakhstan in their IPO was quoted saying that to meet the uranium demand till 2030, we need to actually create two similar companies like ours. Now that's a big challenge to look at because honestly the capacity and the capex in this sector is very low. But why is the capex so low and why can't it be started right now? So what happens here is break-even analysis come into picture. Now uranium had seen this entire long journey where it went to as high as $135. But after that, it came down to almost as low as $18. There is hardly any institutional investment in this. In fact, investors are not keen to look at uranium commodities or byproducts or derivatives around this commodity, largely because of the volatility that's attached to this. On a break-even basis, you practically need the price to be at least $50 to $55 for the capex to increase in this. So until you don't reach that price level, there will not be any capex that these miners will start in this utility. Now that was all about pricing. Price understood. But how much time does it take to get the entire capex and production in line? So let me tell you, from the time you think you will start the production or you want to start the capex, it takes as high as 1 to 2 years for the mining to actually start and for the production to actually come out of the mines. So that's the lag period that you have. So what are the producers saying? The biggest producers in Kazakhstan and likes of Cameco, which control about 28% of the global supply, do not see any production or capex increase in the next few years. So they are not planning any capex. Even if they plan, there is a lag period of 1 to 2 years, which means you do not see any capacity coming in at least till 2026. But there is a rising demand. 50 new reactors are coming up. There's lots getting spent. In fact, countries which were thinking of shutting out these nuclear capacity are now rethinking on their plan, right? So you have this whole demand setup which is going to come up. You have this whole mess around coal, oil, renewables and so on and so forth. But the production is still lagging, so you do not have the production coming back in line. And this is exactly what we are talking about. When you do not have the fossil fuel production coming in, when you do not have the uranium production coming in, we believe price is something that will determine everything, and price will only increase multifold from here. Of course, there could be anything around this thesis, but for the next decade, we are completely betting on uranium to be the next source of your energy. All good, right? These theses are all good, but if you can't invest into a thesis, makes no sense. So how do I invest into uranium and entire nuclear energy? Worry not, there are listed ETFs in US called URA and URNM, which ultimately invest into these miners which are into the uranium manufacturing, etc. So sitting in India, just via your trading account, you can buy these ETFs and participate into this big next decadal story on uranium. If you want to hear more such interesting idea, do not forget to subscribe to our channel and visit www.easternfin.com for more information. Stay tuned.